On this week's episode, we're continuing our series on spirituality. We're talking about the idea of praying, but only in times of trouble. Do commitment and vulnerability play a part in how we see ourselves in the bigger picture?
Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to the Anchor of the Week, where we have hard conversations, hear people's stories, and challenge perspectives. I'm Courtney.
And I'm Zach.
And we're back at it with a fresh new episode for you. We are continuing our series on the search for spirituality. And this one actually was inspired by last week's episode.
Yes. Yeah. We had a lady, I believe you were talking to her, and one of her answers was to do with praying when tough times come, basically. Mm-hmm. And when, world disasters or obviously she related to the story of Turkey and Syria and things like that. So the idea that when bad things come, that's when people pray.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
It's very interesting.
And we want to try and dive into that a little bit more today and figure out why that's the case.
Yes. First things first, if you have not watched last week's episode, the On the Streets episode, you must. It's really fascinating. And I love that we get to meet people, hear even just 20 seconds of their opinions or their thoughts. Yeah. And then literally it will form a whole new episode for us.
Yeah, here we are. Yeah.
Because it's just so fascinating to listen to people. But we have the whole Turkey and Syria situation right now. As you guys know, the earthquake. I believe yesterday
it's tough, isn't it?
Yeah. I think 41,000 is the most recent death toll that I read, which is insane. And it is horrible and horrific, And it's in these times of crisis where we see a lot more people kind of on that search for spirituality or being more open or hashtag pray for Turkey, hashtag pray for whatever that place is, when we come, up against or these kind of situations. I don't know if that's the best way to put that, but it's fascinating because it's it unlocks this whole other side of people. Yeah. And why? Yeah. That's the question.
I mean, I think there's going to be quite a few different reasons why, I think the first thing that I am drawn to is the idea that actually this is something deep down that people actually maybe believe or think could be true anyway.
Yeah.
The idea of a higher power or the idea of a God or something out there. And so, when I feel like it's easy, obviously, when things are good and things are relaxed and, you've got what you need and whatever, then you just go about your day and you're not as reliant on the idea of I don't need a God. Nothing bad is happening to me. The amount of conversations I've had on the streets where I'm going, oh, is there anything I can pray for you for? And they're like, well, I'm fine. I don't need prayer. I don't need that basically. But then, if they're not they give me the response of being pray for
someone
homeless,
that needs it.
Pray for someone who needs it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just interesting. I think deep down, if that's your last call almost, or if that's what you go to when times are tough, it's actually they must deep down believe that there is a God or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting too, because you say that people pray for someone else that needs it.
Yeah.
We see that a lot when we for example do free teas and coffees.
Yeah.
The amount of time that I've heard someone say, oh, I don't need it, give it to someone that does. And I'm like, we all need this. It's just a cup of tea. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What is it in us that makes us say right now I'm fine?
Yeah.
What is that even standard within us?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Is there something that we measure that by? Oh, I'm okay enough that I don't need help.
Yeah.
Or then once something confronts me to show me that I'm lacking something.
Yeah.
One of my other things as well that really I don't know, has been on my mind in this whole topic is I feel when big disasters or world events like this happen, a lot of tragedies in whatever way that might look, is that we understand or we are kind of more acquainted with how small we are.
Right.
In the grand scheme of life.
Yeah.
And I think when we're not confronted or we're not disrupted or we're just kind of going through our routines, it's very easy to be more self-focused, not necessarily in a oh, I'm a super selfish kind of way, but there's nothing really to kind of pull you out of just your life,
Yeah.
But something like this happens and then you're wait a second.
Yeah.
There's 41,000 people, that have lost their lives because of this tragedy.
Yeah.
My life is so small, so minuscule in comparison to everything else. And I think understanding how small we are or having that kind of wake-up call makes us want to be a part of something bigger.
Yeah.
Or there then has to be something bigger.
Yeah.
Because I am so small in the grand scheme of things, I think.
It does. It puts you into the bigger perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I think, tagging along to those things, I think obviously when you're in that situation, you can see, okay, I am small. So there's something bigger out there. But also with that concept, if they live that day to day, that means sacrifice. That means they have to give their life up for something, because they're coming to terms with the idea of a God. And if that is the case, then obviously people relate religion or to God or faith and stuff like that as a bunch of like a set of rules or things you have to give up that you enjoy, all these things. And so I feel like it's easy, isn't it, to be like, because what I genuinely believe is like people actually do believe that there is something. I feel like there's like, okay, yeah, you do have a bunch of people who are atheists or whatever, different religion, but I think deep down people do know. Yeah. It's just the idea that people aren't willing to commit to something because it means sacrifice. It means letting go of what maybe some of the bad habits that you have now.
Yeah.
And I think that is unattractive. Like the idea of a God for people is unattractive. The idea of someone who knows you better than yourself and the idea of giving your life up for someone, like that's not attractive, is it?
No, well, but it goes against everything that we're told though.
Yeah.
And everything that like, not even that we're told, that this world is like almost like curated for us to be, like everything is advertised for our well-being, for our promotion, for our, success. Like literally like it's so hard to like break that mold.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like it's like we're living in this world that's like convincing us that it's all about us.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I don't know. That's
crazy, isn't it? Yeah,
it is really crazy.
I mean, I think that's one side of the. I can't sit here and be like that's the case for everyone.
And that's the answer. We're done our episode now.
Wow, this I've got a cough or something coming along here.
All right.
I can't laugh because I feel like anyway. I'm gonna.
How are you not gonna laugh when I'm making all these great jokes?
It's so weird. Okay. Anyway, so yeah, it's not the be all or end all, obviously.
No.
And I think there is. There was also another guy who I talked to on the Streets episode, and I can't remember his name. I don't even know if I knew his name, but when I was chatting to him, I was asking these questions and he was like, oh yeah, that's a good point. Or like,
never thought about that.
Yeah, never thought about that.
Yeah.
And so I think there is that element of like, you probably have those group of people who actually don't ask themselves these questions or dive into the answers too often. I think that's partly related to, well, I don't know, but if you have what you need, then why would you need to ask any questions? You know? And so when something bad does happen, you then are in this place of like, it's almost like a place of need or a place of like, it's like a form of vulnerability, I would say. Yeah. It's like, like desperation for something or for someone.
Or like you have to admit why. Like we don't know why these things happen, you know? Like, and I think when something like this happens, we're always like, okay, like why? Like what's the reason? Why? Is there a reason? How does this stuff happen?
Yeah.
So because of that, we're then almost like forced to think critically, I think.
Yeah.
As opposed to in the daily, you don't have to
think critically. Yeah.
And we love thinking critically here.
Yes, big fans of that. Yeah. So he was genuinely just, I don't want to say ignorant. I don't want to call him out like that.
No,
but
great guy.
Yeah, good lad. Yeah, seemed like a nice guy. Aussie, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
But, he didn't know anything. He didn't think about anything. So I think you do have that group who is like, it's almost like a time where they come to realize it's like, oh shoot, okay. Like, yeah, they become that small person in the big world. And they're like, blimey, there's more out there. Like, it like wakes them up. Yeah, blimey.
That's probably exactly what
there
they
we go. That's what they think.
Verbatim.
Yeah. Interesting.
It is. Now you got some articles and such as well. Yeah.
So this is from the New York Times.
Hey.
So there you go.
Reputable.
Yeah. But it's basically just to give you guys context. It's this guy. He talks about his son. I believe they're Jews. And they go to synagogues and, services and stuff like that. But the context is it's a conversation that he has with his son. And his son is doing some, I don't know exactly what it is. I'd have to read it again. But he's doing some kind of course in theology or religion or something. I don't know. But normally, someone who's doing that normally believes in something. So he was like, oh, do you not believe in a God? And the son is basically talking about how he doesn't believe in a God. And it's their conversation, right? But what was interesting about their chat and what this guy was sharing is actually the idea that these guys, like, they practice religious rituals or traditions. Like, they'll go to a synagogue, they pray, they do things like this, but they don't actually believe in a God. So it's really weird, right? Because they're doing these things, but they're like feeding something that's not even there almost.
The action without the belief.
Right. But the reason they do that is because it almost like puts them in this place of delusion to think like, oh, like this fantasy. Actually, it's called fictionalism, I think. Is it?
Fictionalism.
Yeah, right. So
Another word I did not need to learn.
there we go. Yeah, I wish I highlighted it, but I can attach the link to
The show notes.
to the show notes. Yeah, but basically, when they pray, they go into this place where they don't have to. Like, it's almost like they block out all the noise, and it's like they're like. There's a quote at the very bottom. Basically, that will summarize it actually much better. But it says. Soon Rex was the son. Rex will stand before our congregation and pray to a God he can't quite believe in. It will be a magical morning, and for that moment, at least, will transcend the troubles of the world. So in that moment of prayer, in that moment of, the ritual or the thing, they go past the noise and the problems of the world, and it's like their like fictional peace almost that they make up by praying. That's basically what he's explaining. Which is really interesting, right?
Yeah. I don't even fully know how to think about
take
that.
all that. Yeah. So basically things like this bring them comfort and bring them to a place where like, oh, everything's happening, but like when I pray, it's like their way of bringing peace to a situation. But they don't believe it. So it's I don't know exactly what it takes from that, to be honest, but it's just interesting that, well, these guys are Jews. Like it's a committed life, right? I don't know too much about Jews, but I know it's like, it's pretty hard, like hardcore.
I mean, it depends on your,
I don't know.
like you could be Orthodox, you could be
Okay, right.
Hasidic, you could
Sure.
there's a lot of different
Okay,
things.
Cool.
But
still, they would classify themselves as Jews.
it would be like us going to church every week, going to prayer meetings.
Yeah.
But not believing that what I'm doing is actually, I guess, going anywhere.
Yeah.
I guess it stops at us. Is that kind of the idea?
They're literally, it's like when you go and have a dream at night, it's like doing everything to keep dreaming.
That's so interesting.
Basically, which is really weird, isn't it?
It's very weird.
So it's like, it's not real what they're feeding into, but at the same time, right, as we're saying that though, what is real is their sense of like peace and what the peace it brings to them and the comfort it brings.
It's like they're aware that, like, as whatever the last line was, in times of trouble, that by doing this, you somehow rise above it.
Yeah.
And that is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But this is okay. This
It's like
might
a coping
be,
mechanism of some kind, right?
Yes, and this is, we might go down a tangent, but maybe this is where the episode is supposed to go. But I was literally this morning even just thinking about escapism, okay?
Right.
And how it's just so easy to like run away from your problems or from things or whatever. And this is exactly what this is. But like, at what point does like spirituality and anything, religion, spirituality, God, crystals, whatever you want to call it, like when does that turn into escapism?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think we need to ask that.
We need to,
question,
because even you call yourself a Christian, which obviously, we are, and that's kind of like our stance on it, but you could still use God to escape, in an unhealthy way.
Yeah. But also,
what's the line?
Having said all of that, right? Also, when we talk about like, okay, yeah, escapism. Wow. Well, that's not even a word. So at
least you know that this week.
yeah. All right. Anyway, so I'm still convinced, but I don't think it was a word. Anyway, so escapism. There we go. Like, okay, to you and me, that's bad, right? Escapism. Oh my days! Wow, I can't even do that right.
Escapism.
Okay,
yes. To
escaping.
Us,
there we go.
As you say, escaping.
To us, it's bad, but to Rex and his family or whatever, it's actually not a bad thing. So it's almost like reality is just bad, and that's just the way it is.
Interesting.
This is me kind of
Does it depend
assuming
on
a little bit
on your worldview? Are we going to go back in a series?
I mean, obviously, it has to come down to that to a certain point. But I think people are cool with the idea of, let's escape. Yeah, that's good, because what we live in currently is awful. So like, there's no hope in where we live. And so what's the point in staying here? Basically, I think that is like, what they're feeding, So yeah, but also having said that as well, just another add-on, it's like, this is related to them and how they feel. So it's still the idea of, I was reading another article as well by actually this, I think, she called herself a Christian. I think she is a bit more on the progressive side of things. So I think she's left the church a bit more, but so she found God outside the church. And basically what she's saying is, you pray for yourself and not anything to do with God. You pray to God, but it's purely, it doesn't change any outcome of the world. It doesn't, like, for example, if I'm gonna pray for healing and I've got a bad leg, like for her, from what I read and understood, again, I can attach the thing for the show notes, but like, I'm just praying to bring me a sense of peace or comfort or whatever. I'm not praying because I actually believe
So to like
that my leg can be
self-soothe,
healed.
essentially.
Yeah, basically, it's a self thing. Yeah, so they're praying for themselves to feel a certain way, to put them in a certain place, rather than, because I feel like, at least for me, I can speak for myself. When I'm praying, obviously, I believe in who I'm praying to. So it's not just about me. I'm not just, and you know, quite often I'll pray for other people. That's selfless in that sense. It's not praying so I can get something out of that. You know, so it's like my eyes are on something else, but actually what she was saying, they're praying for themselves to feel a certain thing. And I think that's the same thing with this other guy as well. Like they pray to, be in this certain place. Interesting, isn't it?
It's so interesting.
And I feel like we'll find that a little bit with the spirituality realm, or we do find that a bit. And I you know, I don't know the full story, and we're going to find out more as we do future episodes. But it's like, you're just feeding, like you're just doing it for yourself. And I feel like, I know we touched on this before, but it's just feeding that whole selfish, there we go, like lifestyle, isn't it? And I don't know if you really find much fulfillment in that, to be honest.
Yeah. I'm like stuck on the idea of we're using it to like soothe ourselves.
Yeah.
But again, that just goes back to the coping mechanisms of when something like happens, a disaster happens in the world.
Yeah.
I think we all as humans have this thing of like, when we know it's not right, we know, but we also know we can't necessarily do anything about it.
Right.
So what's the best thing that I could do? I can do something to soothe myself, to make me feel like.
So you're not actually praying for the event. You're praying for yourself to feel like
better.
Yeah.
Because we realize there's nothing that we can do,
Yeah.
for example.
Yeah.
You know, or maybe not nothing, but very little,
And
honestly.
it's that point that brings them to to pray.
It's like it's like we reach the end of ourselves. We see, okay, I'm at the end of myself.
Yeah.
But instead of then breaking through that to be like, okay, maybe there is something bigger, something that I actually should commit my life to.
Yeah.
It's like, then we retract and go, I'm at the end. Okay, so I might as well just back away from that end again and make myself feel okay, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No. Well, here we are, just verbally
processing
processing a little bit. Processing, sorry.
Was that a dig on my accent?
Sorry. No, that's your not American. Wow. Canadian?
This episode's about to get cut short.
You do have a Canadian accent.
It already came out when I said coping mechanisms.
Oh, coping. Okay, I didn't even notice.
Anyway. Moving on, what else we got in the notes here before we completely derail this?
Anyway, I feel like those are good points though.
Yeah.
Things to think about, yeah. So,
yeah.
But I don't know. Because obviously I think that's just one side of the coin. I think the other side is people actually are just, like, they will pray for an event, and that's just purely based off of, because they actually do believe when it comes, like, the last string, the last straw, it's like, right, like, there is a God and he can do something, you know?
But then, okay, so let's just say you're in that position. So you're not doing it for escapism, but like something like this happens and you realize, oh, okay, actually, no, there has to be a God. I do believe there's a God. So I'm praying for this or whatever. And then, like, I guess it kind of fades away. Mm-hmm. And then you kind of forget. Like, why does that happen, you know? Is it going back to that, like, lack of commitment that we were talking about before? Or, like...
Okay. One of my points that I think possibly, okay?
Yeah.
So vulnerability, right? I think, now, I don't know if this is going to answer anything or if this is just a side note.
It's okay. We love it.
I looked up the definition, like what vulnerability is. Because I think, you know, when we talk about, like, when you're in that place of lacking, when you're in that place of not having something or whatever, something bad happening, like, that's vulnerable, right? You're in this place of being helpless, stranded a little bit, alone, whatever. The definition of vulnerability is in need of special care, support, or protection because of age, disability, or risk of abuse or neglect, or whatever. So is it a lack of, like, vulnerability, like, that puts us in this place of, like, because if you're not vulnerable, you're never recognizing the things that you lack in or the things that you need. So if you're, you know, so I feel like it's, like, correlated to that a bit of, like, well, yeah, if you're never going to think about, like, your feelings or your emotions or your life critically in that sense, then why would you ever need to turn to anything, right?
Because you're not acquainted with your need.
Yeah, but I think the more vulnerable you are, I think the more open you are to even the idea of religion or God or
anything's
bigger, yeah,
beyond the material.
because you then realize you actually are lacking in a lot of things, and the things that the materialistic side of life or the day to day is not enough to fill that.
Yeah.
So I think vulnerability is a biggie.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then where does commitment come in with that as well?
Oh golly. Oh golly.
Does it? Because I feel like
it's it's a good point. Like say that again, as in like,
okay, so we have this whole like, okay, we're vulnerable,
Yeah.
or like we need to understand our lack.
right.
But I feel like that's one thing. But then I also feel like we also don't love to commit to something.
Right.
Maybe part of it is because there's like well, what if we're wrong? Maybe. Or maybe it's because if I'm to fully commit to something, that means I'm fully vulnerable. I don't know. Like is there a correlation between commitment and vulnerability? If those are two things that could stop us from actually believing that there's something more to this life as opposed to just in times of like critical need?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is just off of first instinct thoughts, but I think when you are vulnerable, if you know what you're lacking in, I feel like it's easier to be committed to something. Is that not right? Or because you're more acquainted with like the things that you're needing, or you're more acquainted with the idea that the way you live right now
It's not enough.
is not enough. So I think with that idea, then you go into something and you're like, it's like, yeah, you know the answers that need, you know the questions that need answering more.
So you're more committed to finding them.
Yeah. And then I think and then you're like, okay, Christianity is answering this, and that. Like, so that's like 8 of my 9 questions that I have, or do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
or like maybe they'll find that in a different religion, honestly. And then, yeah. But I don't know if that's a good answer, to be honest. But I think, I think it has a role for sure.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Because it's easy to say, oh, people just don't want to commit. You know what I mean? But I feel like that's also kind of like, I don't know, cutting people short a bit.
Well, what are you going to,
Like-
you're not going to commit to anything if you have everything, right? Right?
I think so.
I think so, yeah.
Maybe.
I would think anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I can see how, for example, the church, right?
Yeah.
Like I can, I'm going to church. I can see like that I need this community around me. I can see that I need the discipleship. I can see that I need a Christian environment. Like, I can see I need the preachings and stuff like that. So it's like, those are like answering big questions that I know I need. So it's like, yeah, I'm going to commit to this because this is answering those things that I lack in, I guess, or that I need. Yeah.
And I guess because I think we've already talked about this, that like commitment requires sacrifice.
Yeah. Right.
But if I understand that I'm like vulnerable and understand that I am lacking something, then that sacrifice doesn't seem as big.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
All right. So if we're going to take also the like commitment just in general, right?
Right.
And we go back to the very beginning of the whole point of this conversation, right? Which is, why is it in time of need, are we willing to be like, okay, like I'm going to pray, or I'm going to accept that we live in a spiritual world? Or,
Yeah.
So if we can do that in a time of need, why can't we commit to doing that when we're maybe less in need? You know what I mean? Or like from what it looks,
Yeah.
Does that come to admitting that, okay, actually, even when things aren't like completely devastating, that I still have a lack that I need to kind of search for?
Yeah.
Or what's kind of the...
Yeah. Because I think, I know and I'm confident in this, but like God is in the times of tough and in the times of good. Like that's just a constant, right? So, if people are acting like that, their actions are saying, oh, God only turns up when bad things happen. Or there's the idea of God can only help me when bad things are happening, right?
Right.
So it's just, which doesn't make sense. So it has to go with sacrifice. It has to do with the idea that you have to give up things, which I know I mentioned, but you have to let go of certain aspects of your life that you're currently living in.
Yeah. So if we believe that there is, something more in these hard times, then we basically have to also believe that there's that something more when everything is like peachy keen.
Yeah.
And commit to that idea.
Yeah.
Commit to that belief, I guess.
Right. But also, having said that, it's tough if if you're under the impression that you need to find something that's good for you, that works for you, that is, like what's your truth, almost that kind of whole idea. Then this frame works for them, because when things are good, like this is not something that I need, but when I do need it, I'm going to revert to it. So it's like, so again, like that, it's just for people like, I don't know, for you and me, we're sat here like, that doesn't make sense. How can people think like that? But for them, it's like, no, but this is
what makes perfect sense.
Yeah, this is what makes perfect sense for people.
Yeah.
which I understand. Like, I can see that if that's your framework, that's your way of thinking. Like, yeah, that I understand why that you do that, you know, or why you're not committing, because you've actually just committed to something that you're like comfortable with, and that works for you. This is what works for you. So, yeah. But at the same time, I do, you know, go back to what we believe and what we think. You know, it's like you do have to sacrifice and you have to give up things for truth and for like, well, for God, but for the way of living. Yeah. So, yeah, just a few things to dissect there, but
but this is why we love talking to people, though. Yeah, and we'll be talking to more people. We'll have some guests on in future episodes as well that think very differently than we do. You know, or on very different like journeys when they're search for spirituality than we are, because I think it's so important, so healthy that we not only just challenge one another in this, but also like, as you said, like for me, it's easy to sit here and be like, well, that's not what life is, or like that's not how I see the world. Yeah. But remembering that other people are in a completely different point. Yeah. And maybe we're all searching for the same thing, but we're finding very different ways of trying to get it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So I love it. And I love that we're talking about this. And I can't wait to hear more people's stories as well and just kind of see where they're at in their journey. Yeah.
Yeah. Next week we have a guest coming on.
Yes.
And we're talking a bit more about their way of finding spirituality, or their way of finding that peace and that comfort. So
exactly. They know there's something more.
Yeah. But stay tuned, team.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Right. What's next? Where can they find us, Courtney?
Typical places, as you know. We are on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all podcast platforms under the Anchor of the Week, and Instagram and TikTok under the same as well. And if you guys are not on our Instagram or on our TikTok, you're missing out.
Yes, yeah.
We've got some pretty hilarious videos on there.
Banter, pure banter.
Yeah, it's all of the behind the scenes things that you miss, but you do not want to miss it because it's a wild time. So make sure you check all of that out. Keep yourself entertained throughout the week, and we will see you next week.
Yep. See you later.